This is an epic tale of arrogance, ingenuity, and a desert that was turned into a graveyard. We're about to dive into one of history's most shocking military defeats. A story that really proves that hubris, well, it often leads to ruin. Let's begin.
So, let's set the scene. It's 53 BCE. In the vast, sun-scorched plains of Mesopotamia, a stage was set for one of the most dramatic showdowns in history. On one side, you have the relentless war machine of the Roman Republic, and on the other, the powerful, almost mysterious Parthian Empire. This wasn't just another battle. It was a collision of civilizations, and it was about to prove that the East wasn't some shadow of the West, but its absolute equal.
To really wrap your head around the shocking outcome of this battle, we first have to understand the two powers at play, and more importantly, the two very different men who were about to face off.
The core philosophies of these two empires just could not have been more different. Rome, well, it was built on the legion, heavy infantry, rigid discipline, and this unshakable belief in its own superiority. Parthia, on the other hand, was an empire of horsemen. They valued mobility, patience, and clever tactics way more than just brute force. It was steel versus speed, discipline versus ingenuity, and in the end, it was hubris versus patience. Leading the Roman charge was Marcus Licinius Crassus. This guy was fabulously wealthy, one of the three most powerful men in Rome, right alongside Caesar and Pompey. But here's the thing, Caesar was conquering Gaul, Pompey was famous for his victories, and Crassus, well, he had a massive chip on his shoulder. He was missing the one thing a Roman aristocrat craved more than anything, personal military glory. So he just goes for it. Without Senate approval, he launches an invasion of Parthia, thinking they'd be an easy win, a quick path to the fame he so desperately wanted. He totally underestimated his enemy.
And facing him was this man, Surena. He was the complete opposite of Crassus, a young, charismatic general from a noble Parthian family, not even 30 years old. He wasn't some politician chasing glory. He was a true military innovator. He understood the desert, he understood his army, and his men followed him out of genuine devotion, not fear. And he was about to give Rome a lesson it would never, ever forget.
Full of confidence, Crassus marches his legions east, walking directly into a trap that had been meticulously, perfectly designed by the desert master himself.
And we're not talking about a small force here. The scale of this army was immense. We're talking 7 legions of heavy infantry, 4,000 cavalry, another 4,000 light troops, all told 40,000 men, an army that had conquered most of the known world, now marching straight into the arid heart of Mesopotamia.
And here it is, the first critical mistake. A local guide, who is secretly a Parthian agent, convinces Crassus to ignore the safer route along the Euphrates River. Instead, he plunges his entire army directly into the desert. It was flat, open, and totally waterless, basically the perfect killing field for an army of horse archers.
Surena's plan was just brilliantly simple. Step 1, lure the heavy, slow-moving Romans out into the open. Step 2, never ever engage them in the close-quarters combat where they were the best. Step 3, use relentless arrow attacks to wear them down both physically and mentally. And finally, when they were broken and exhausted, encircle them for the kill.
So now the battle begins. The Romans form their lines, shields locked, expecting a charge. But what they got instead was something from a nightmare, a tactic they had never seen before and were completely unprepared for.
This is the legendary Parthian shot. Surena's horse archers would gallop towards the Roman lines, unleash a storm of arrows, and then peel away like they were retreating. But as they fled, they would twist around in their saddles and fire backwards with just astonishing accuracy. For a disciplined Roman soldier who could only fight what was right in front of him, this was maddening, it was terrifying.
And listen, these weren't just any old bows and arrows. As the historian Plutarch tells us, the Parthian composite bow was a marvel of technology. It was so incredibly powerful, it could punch right through Roman armor from 200 meters away. The Romans' shields, their armor, it offered almost no protection.
But what truly broke the Roman spirit was that the arrow storm just never stopped. Hour after hour, it rained down on them. See, Surena had brought a supply train of 1,000 camels loaded with nothing but arrows. So when an archer ran out, he'd just ride back to the camels, grab more, and get right back to the fight. It was a relentless, absolutely soul-crushing assault.
Under that relentless sun and the unending hail of arrows, the legendary discipline of the Roman legion just started to crack. This is the moment the battle turned from a military fight into a complete psychological collapse.
In a moment of sheer desperation, Crassus's son, Publius, leads a cavalry charge, trying to break the circle. It was a brave move, but a foolish one. Surena was waiting for it. He lured Publius away from the main force and then unleashed his elite troops, the cataphracts, these heavily armored shock cavalry. They just crushed the Roman charge. And then Surena did something utterly brutal. He had Publius's head cut off, mounted on a pike, and paraded it right in front of the Roman army.
Can you just imagine being a Roman soldier in that moment? You're thirsty, exhausted, terrified. And then you look up and see the head of your commander's son being waved around like a trophy. For Crassus, it was a father's worst nightmare. For his army, it was the final blow. The last ounce of morale just evaporated right there.
And this raises a really crucial question. It isn't just about tactics or weapons. How does the spirit of a seemingly invincible army, an entire empire's worth of confidence, how does that actually break? At Carrhae, it broke with the sight of one man's head on a pike, a symbol that their courage, their discipline, maybe even their gods, had abandoned them in this desert.
Crassus himself was killed a short time later during a chaotic attempt to negotiate some kind of truce. The legend that followed is just grimly poetic. They say that Surena, mocking the Romans' infamous greed that started this whole war, had molten gold poured down Crassus' throat. A brutal, symbolic end for a man consumed by his own ambition.
The numbers here are simply staggering. Of the 40,000 men Crassus led into the desert, 10,000 were killed. Another 10,000 were captured and marched away to the far corners of the Parthian Empire. Most of them would never see Rome again. It was, without a doubt, one of the most devastating defeats in Roman history.
So what was the ultimate fallout from this catastrophe? Well, the Battle of Carrhae wasn't just a military loss. It was a profound psychological shock to the entire Roman world, with a legacy that would last for centuries.
The fates of the two commanders really reveal a tragic irony. Crassus's name became a synonym for arrogant failure, for greed. Meanwhile, Surena, the brilliant victor, was hailed as a hero, and then he was executed by his own king, who grew jealous and fearful of his fame. A tragic end for the man who humbled Rome.
The long-term consequences were massive. The Euphrates River became the hard border between the two empires. Rome developed a deep-seated Parthian fear, a genuine respect for this eastern power it had once just dismissed. Surena's tactics, they were studied for generations. But maybe most importantly, Carrhae stands as this timeless lesson that no power, no matter how great, is immune to the dangers of arrogance.
And that leaves us with this thought. The desert remembers the fall of the Roman eagles. It's a reminder that overconfidence, a refusal to understand a different culture and a different way of fighting, it can lead to catastrophe. It's a lesson from 53 BCE that really begs the question, what can that same arrogance cost a superpower today?